Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Clean My Mac X. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Vitici. Hi, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I feel like an icicle, though. It's a little cold in the great Midwest of the United States. It's negative degrees right now, Federico, even in Celsius.
You told me the temperature, and I could not believe that there was something that could happen outside of the North Pole. From my Italian perspective, that sounds just insane. Like something like minus 15 Celsius. That is not a livable condition of life.
No, it really isn't. I have not left the house today, other than I did run out very quickly to take one of my kids to school. But yeah, it's bad today. It's going to be worse next week. Sometime during the weekend, I'm going to jump in the car, run to the grocery store, buy a bunch of supplies, and then just not leave the house for a week.
So let's make this conversation more on theme. Do you use your Netatmo weather station to check the temperature outside?
Oh, yes, I do.
So what's your setup like, again, for people who don't know?
Yeah, so I've got a Netatmo weather station, and it's got a sensor that sits out on the windowsill just off the back of my living room, kitchen area of my house. And it's not really, I mean, the temperature was better based on that than what the, Yahoo or Weather Channel or whatever was telling me, but only by 2 or 3 degrees. And so when you're already at -5, -3 is very cold comfort, as they say. It didn't make me feel any better about the situation by any precisely how bone-chillingly cold it was outside in the backyard.
Well, hopefully I hope you will survive, John.
I think I'll make it.
We need you around here, so please don't die in the cold. If you can.
I won't. I'll stay. I won't go out. I'll just sit here at my desk and work away.
Sit at your desk and watch Apple commercials, because we're going to talk about them today.
We are. I mean, there was a series of iPad commercials that came out in the last couple of weeks that I thought they were really well done and really interesting, but I had this nagging feeling in the back of my head that some of this I had already kind of seen before, and that's what we want to talk about today.
Mm-hmm. So it's not like I feel like we should note this at the beginning. It's not like we think that the apps that Apple highlighted in the commercials are bad. Those are excellent apps. And it's not that we think we can teach Apple a lesson and that we know more than the App Store team at Apple. But we've been doing this a long time. We try a lot of apps, and we've seen from our outside perspective and from the perspective of, writers who cover Apple every day, it's kind of weird to say, but our job includes watching commercials from this company. And so we've seen these
and writing
apps,
about commercials.
and writing about them. And we've seen these apps come up over and over again. And we thought maybe we can use our perspective and we can use our knowledge to sort of include more recommendations, sort of the outtakes, but not from Apple, from us, for additional apps that you should try if you watch one of these Apple commercials and you thought, hey, that's interesting that I can do that on my iPad, and we wanted to offer you more options. That's the idea.
Exactly. And I agree with you. I think that's important to say up front, because these apps, some of these apps in these commercials are apps that we've covered a bunch of times in the past on Mac Stories, and they're some of our favorites. I mean, GoodNotes was in here, and I just reviewed GoodNotes about a week ago, and I love that app. But GoodNotes has also been highlighted more than once by Apple, and I feel like they need to spread the love a little bit and maybe consider some other apps.
Yeah. So the first commercial, we should just jump right in. A new way to take notes, as you mentioned. It features Notability.
Yep.
Which is, one of the top paid iPad apps. It's been for years on the App Store in the top charts. Really, really excellent app. But of course, the most popular alternative that I think it's even higher in the top charts is GoodNotes. There's a new version of GoodNotes, and I know, John, that you really like and use the app a lot. All your secret projects, they start as GoodNotes.
They do. People really should look at the screenshots at Mac Stories more carefully, I feel,
Uh-huh.
because you and I have a
Yeah,
bit of a
people including
history.
me.
Yeah, you included. But you and I have a little bit of a history of hiding things in there. And so, if you want a clue about what's coming up down the road, that's always a good place to look. But yes, Notability is a fantastic app. And I'd say that the thing that sets Notability apart from some of the other apps, and probably why Apple maybe used this and has used it in the past, is that aside from just taking notes and allowing drawing on a canvas, it also lets you record audio. And that's a great thing for people like students who are sitting in a lecture taking notes about the class that they're taking. But it's not something I personally use, which is why one of the reasons overall I like Good Notes better.
One of the apps that I feel like Apple should have at least mentioned or shown, just because it's a new app, it's got more of a modern design, a modern business model based on a subscription. It's called Noted, and it's exactly like it's got that audio component like Notability, but it's done better in that this application is more. Think of it like a mix of Notability and Bear, in that you don't handwrite, you type your notes, but there's also an audio recording tool built in, and you can record and type. And then if you play back, you will see your typed notes appear in time with the audio. It's really well done. It's perfect for college students, it's perfect for meetings, it's perfect for people who need to take notes while listening to something else. And it's got that modern design. It supports sort of a rich text syntax. It supports iCloud. It supports iPhone and iPad, of course. There's even an Apple Watch app. And it's modern, it's new, but it's been actually developed. It's featured on the App Store. I think we covered it on Clap Mac Stories before. So that's definitely another good option. But if you're into handwriting your notes, you don't want to type them, Note Shelf is another app that we covered years ago on Mac Stories. It's not as frequently updated as Good Notes and Notability, but it's one of the popular ones alongside Notes Plus. I think at some point I also used Notes Plus, but I haven't touched it in a while. Evernote comes to mind. I know that everybody likes to poke fun at Evernote for trying a bunch of weird things over the years, but the app has gotten a lot better. I know that our Ryan at Mac Stories likes Evernote.
Yep.
It's a lot cleaner than it used to be, and it's a lot, it still has a lot of features that you can play with.
Yeah, and then there's another option is always, Microsoft has OneNote, and OneNote it has been on the App Store long before the rest of Office appeared, which just happened very recently. I am not a huge fan of OneNote, and I think I'm still suffering from post-traumatic working in an office Microsoft shock.
Mhm.
I try not to use Microsoft products that much, but it's a good app. It's a good app, and you can do notes in that as well. And then there's tons of different kinds of note-taking apps that you can do that you type in, whether it's Bear or Ulysses or Agenda or something like that.
Yeah, there's so many options when it comes to typing your notes that Apple wanted to focus on the pencil and handwriting and capturing audio, which makes sense to feature Notability. But note taking is such a large category that CGP Grey used to say on Cortex that there can never be enough task managers on the App Store, and I think the same rings true for note taking apps. The idea of note taking supports such a large variety of needs and approaches to taking notes that whether you want to handwrite or also record audio, or record audio but type, or just type, you have really just go to the App Store and type notes and you will find so many alternatives.
Yeah, to me it's one of the most interesting categories right now, because you have everything, as you said, from things that are centered around typing to those that focus on handwriting. But then you can even use things like Concepts, which we talked about last week with Yarocini, which is more of a drawing app, but it also supports, text labels and handwriting and all those kind of things. So it just kind of depends what angle you want to come at note taking from. And that's why I'd kind of like to see Apple get beyond Notability, because while I like Notability a lot, I just feel like there are other options that could be suggested to users.
Yeah.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Clean My Mac X from our friends at MacPaw. Did you know that Clean My Mac can speed up your Mac OS performance with maintenance scripts? It can remove temporary items and optimize system libraries so your Mac runs more smoothly and just feels better to use. On average, Clean My Mac X removes up to 74 gigs of junk on a typical Mac. That could be anything from system junk, pieces of old apps, outdated broken items, and a whole lot more. Basically, a lot of junk that you don't need anymore, and that could be slowing down your Mac. I've used Clean My Mac X for years. I run it about once a week, and it frees up gigabytes of data every single time I run it. I also love that the latest version runs faster than any previous version, which makes running it every week super simple and fast. Make your Mac as good as new with Clean My Mac X. Show your Mac a little bit of love. Head on over to macpaw.com/cleanmymac now. That's macpaw.com/cleanmymac to make your Mac feel as good as new. I'll put a link in the show notes too. Thanks to Clean My Mac X for their support of the show.
All right. What's the second ad all about?
All right, the second one is called A New Way to Go Paperless. And this focuses on a few different apps. One of them is Shoebox Receipts Tracker, which I know you have used in the past. Could you tell me a little bit about that one?
I did use this before. That's why the name was familiar. So
this is the one that did, I think, didn't it do OCR on the receipts that you took pictures of?
Yeah, it's a combination of, so the last time that I checked on this, it was a combination of machine learning and actual humans looking through the receipts that you upload and determining the name and the amount and the currency and the date, that kind of stuff. And I stopped using this service 2 years ago, but when I was using it, I was really impressed because it removes a lot of friction from having a physical receipt and having a digital record with a PDF attached.
Right.
So the way that it worked, you just take a picture, and there were two ways to go about it. You could use the official app, which I think is what Apple is showing here, or because the service has an API, you could also use integrations from other apps. So you could scan with another scanner and then say upload to Shoebox, and they will still perform the text recognition on the receipt.
Yeah,
really well done. If you're if you have a small business, or if you need to categorize your receipts and you don't want to go them manually one by one, this is a good idea. Just be mindful of the fact that there may be somebody just looking through the receipt to confirm the amount and the date and that kind of stuff.
Right. No, the ad also shows scanning from the camera app, which I'll give you that, Apple. I mean, you gotta promote your own stuff, but I think when it comes to scanning, I generally prefer to use an app. Probably my favorite is ScanBot. ScanBot Pro does a great job of scanning, whether it's a single receipt or a multi-page document, and then OCRing it and letting you categorize it, file it, put it in iCloud Drive, all sorts of things. That's a great one. And Scanner Pro too from Riedel, which has been around since really the earliest days of the App Store, is another good option.
Yeah, Scanner Pro is really good. They have their own workflows feature, which is like a way to cut down the number of steps required to share a document, which is really nice. Genius Scan is also another popular option on the App Store. I never actually used it myself, but I see it in the top charts, and I know that the developers were working on a cloud storage service a while ago that I think it's now available in the app. The ad also shows Microsoft Word, which I don't know. How do you feel about Microsoft Word, John?
It's fine. I actually do use it for a couple of things in my Mac Stories work, but the reason they added it to the ad is that not too long ago, really, it's, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, they added the ability to do hand markup of Microsoft Word and other Office documents with the Apple Pencil on the iPad, which is a nice feature. It's not something that I use, but I feel like Apple has been pushing Microsoft's products pretty hard ever since last WWDC, when they announced that Office was coming to the Mac App Store. And now not only is it on iOS, but you can subscribe to Office 365 inside the Mac App Store. You can download the bundle or individual apps and then subscribe as an in-app purchase.
Yeah, which is, of course, big news because, seeing Microsoft on the Mac App Store would have been insane years ago, but now
It would have been, yeah.
now it's possible. Something that I noticed is that both of these apps in the commercials, they do not appear to be optimized for the new iPad Pro.
Yeah, I
So
know.
they have the black bars on top and the bottom for what's it called, pillar boxing, when it's
Right.
vertical. Yeah, it's not a good look, but maybe most people don't care about that. I know that we do, but maybe somebody who's new to the iPad does not necessarily make this a priority.
I suspect this was shot a while ago because on top of that, GoodNotes, we'll get to GoodNotes, it made an appearance in the podcast ad, and it was version 4 when the ads came out just after version 5 was released.
I thought you were going to say it was shot a while ago because these ads were edited on the iPad Pro and it probably took them a while to edit the videos on an iPad Pro.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Which, by the way, the commercials say filmed and edited on an iPad Pro. Do we agree that Apple used LumaFusion to do this? I don't think they used iMovie.
No, I think they should have used LumaFusion. If they didn't, they were making a mistake.
Or
what?
They were using their own version of Final Cut for the iPad that only Apple has.
Oh, there you go. That's a possibility too. And that's maybe why we haven't seen the behind the scenes because, that's one of the things that left me hanging with these ads is that at the end, they say they were designed and edited and recorded and everything on an iPad. Well, with what? What were the apps? As someone who uses iPads to create things, I think that users want to know what those apps were.
I can tell you that if you want to use the San Francisco typeface in a third-party app, you need to install like a custom certificate, like using apps like AnyFont.
Right.
Or I think there's another called the Right Font. I think it's ironic, like to imagine Apple engineers installing fonts because they want to use San Francisco, but San Francisco is not available in LumaFusion. I honestly think they use the version of Final Cut because I think they are working on one. This is just my personal theory.
Yeah.
Anyway, also the ads do not, if I'm correct, do not mention Dropbox by name or show Dropbox by name ever. They focus on iCloud Drive in files, which is okay, I suppose. It's just kind of strange that they're showing Microsoft apps, but not OneDrive. They're showing just files with iCloud. So the idea of you pay for iCloud and you use iCloud and use files, then you're free to use whatever apps you want to use. But in terms of storage, you use iCloud Drive and files.
Yes. Well, to round out this particular ad, I want to make certain that we mention Paper by 53 because that's the other paperless app that they mention. And Paper, I like Paper, but I think there are better options than Paper today.
Paper is now owned by WeTransfer. Am I correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I could not have pulled that off. You're very good. I would not have pulled that off the top of my head, but you're right. WeTransfer bought them maybe 6 months ago or so.
Yeah, something like that. I always forget. It's still a good app, but I feel like since the acquisition, especially, the pace of updates has slowed down, and there are more powerful and flexible alternatives. I know that you really like Linear Sketch, John.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of my favorites from the Icon Factory. It's an amazingly simple to use sketching app for someone who, especially for someone like me who's not an artist by trade. It's easy to pick that up. And I know they talked about this not long ago on ATP as well. It's just an incredibly well-designed app to pick up very quickly and do quick sketching, whether it's for the sake of art or whether you're taking notes or whether you're laying out an office or a website or doing, I don't know, wireframes for an iOS app, whatever it is. I mean, that's a great app to do it in.
Yeah. Another alternatives may be Tayasui Sketches. I've seen this app before. I think it's pre-installed on some Apple Store devices. Autodesk Sketchbook and Affinity Designer. I have no personal experience with these apps, but I know them all by name or by having seen them at the Apple Store. So they're really good apps if you're looking for alternatives to paper. Now, the next commercial, I have many thoughts, and I'm sure you also have many thoughts about this one.
Yes.
A new way to host your own podcast. This commercial shows Anchor, the podcasting service, which is called out by name. So that's very nice. Just like Notability is called out by name, they also call out Anchor, which is nice. And they show this workflow of recording via Anchor and using GoodNotes for notes about the podcast.
For show notes, yeah.
For show notes, which I don't want to talk about, and GarageBand for mixing the audio and sharing the audio. Now, I get it, right? I have this personal theory of mine that Anchor is going to be bought by Apple eventually.
I know you've told me about this for months now.
Yes, again, just my personal wild speculation. I feel like the message of let's democratize podcasting by letting everybody launch a podcast. I think it's a very powerful message. I am not necessarily a fan of tying the craft of recording a podcast to a specific platform or service. I very much prefer just having my own Skype or FaceTime call and recording my own audio. But I get it why this appeals to people, because it's just the same reason why blogging via Medium appeals to people, because it removes many of the complexities that are involved with getting started.
Right.
I have my own ideas about, I want to own my content, I want to fully control my workflow, but this is an ad that airs on TV and YouTube, and it needs to show regular people how to do a podcast. And surely enough, the ad gets the job done. But because we are podcast professionals, John.
Yes, we are.
There are other ways to do podcasts on iOS.
There are. And I, before we get into those, the title of this ad threw me for a loop at first, because when I read a new way to host your own podcast, I didn't think about recording a podcast. I thought about,
hosting the podcast.
Hosting. This is like an alternative to Libsyn.
No, it's not. Don't be too technical. No. This is not that.
I know that just shows how far down in the rabbit hole
a commercial about a CDN. Come on.
Exactly. So I think the obvious alternative here is Fairlight, because Fairlight has come an incredibly long way from its early origins to be a real competitor to something like Logic if you're interested in editing on iOS. Now, I still think that it's easier to edit a podcast on a Mac, but you and I know that Jason Snell, for example, edits a lot of his podcasts in Fairlight. On some level, a lot of these ads, I think, are lowest common denominator type ads because they go for the easy pick, which is Anchor, right? Whereas I'd kind of like to see a continuum. It's like, okay, you can get started with Anchor, but if you want to go a little further, something like Fairlight will take you there, because Fairlight allows you to do multi-track editing very much like Logic does on a Mac.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I would like to see as well. But again, I understand why for the majority of people, the idea of here's a nicely designed app that supports a microphone that you plug into your iPad, which, by the way, has to be Apple is showing a USB-C microphone, which, okay, sure. Of course, they're not showing any kind of audio interface, but, just at the basics, sort of this romantic idea of anybody with a microphone can be a podcaster, which I'm not saying that it's not true, because it absolutely is, but it does not necessarily mean that you can build a career out of podcasting. And this is not, of course, the message that Apple wants to sell. They're not saying here's a new way to host your own podcast that is going to make money. That is not part of the title of the commercial. So yes, it is possible to host your own podcast. But if you're looking for more advanced solutions because you have a more complex project than just talking into a microphone plugged into your iPad running Anchor, you probably should look somewhere else. Because especially if you want to do interviews or you want to do, multi-track editing, you want to save time, you don't want to spend 6 hours editing in the Anchor UI, you probably should use something else. Also, Who uses GoodNotes for show notes? Seriously.
First of all, they're not shareable. So unless you're doing it by yourself,
Yes.
that's not even an option.
Then again, why wouldn't you type them? It just feels very involved to make pretty artistic, handcrafted show notes for a podcast. The reality, again, that feels like the romantic idea of podcasting. Like, oh, let's make these pretty show notes with colors and cursive, beautiful handwriting. When in reality, it's just usually like a person typing into a Google Doc and trying to sound good on in front of a microphone.
Just a bunch of bullet points that at the end of the week, when you're done with the show, you just delete.
Which is fine, because I honestly think that's also romantic. Just using a text editor and plain text notes to make something enjoyable that people can listen to.
Yeah, I love GoodNotes, but I would not use it for podcasting.
Next, commercial, a new way to create a presentation. Of course, featuring Keynote, plus files and AirPlay. And nothing much to say here. I think this is the best one in the sense that Keynote is really good and it's gotten better over the years.
Yep.
The only presentation that I ever gave in my life in front of an audience of about 150 people, you were there, John.
I was. It was in my hometown. What can I say?
Yes, I used Keynote.
I was required to go.
Yes, you had to. You were contractually obligated to come.
It's part of my job description.
Keynote goer.
Yes, Federico keynote goer.
I used Keynote for this and it was really good. At the time, Keynote for iOS did not support customizing the font size of presenters' notes. That has been fixed. So I had to use Keynote on the Mac to make the font size of my presenter notes bigger. Now you can do that on iOS. But Keynote is really powerful, works really well with modern iOS features like files, like drag and drop, like multitasking. There are alternatives like PowerPoint and Google Slides, but really you should be using Keynote. So this commercial, thumbs up.
Yep, thumbs up. Apple's touting their own thing, and they should, because it's the best app available.
Yeah. So the final one, also have many thoughts about this one. A new way to design your space. Can you go through this ad, John? What's design your space?
All right, design your space it's a combination of apps. It starts out with the Measure app, and the AR feature, and the Measure app allows you to do augmented reality measuring of walls and that sort of thing. And it starts out like that, which immediately raised my eyebrow, just because I don't know. First of all, it's fairly accurate, but it's not great. But then they move into an app called Morpholio Trace, I think it's called.
Yeah.
This is not an app that I was familiar with. It's interesting. It allows you to do all sorts of design of the layout of, say, an office or whatever in the app, and take those measurements and build something out. But this probably seemed to me to be the most aspirational of the ads that we have here.
Yes.
That it's like, is this really how this is going to happen? I mean, I wish it would, but it's a little hard to believe that this is exactly how this is going to work, right? Yeah. And then there was I guess the final app, before I'll let you say your piece on it, is called House,
House with two Z's.
House with two Z's, which reminded me a little bit of the IKEA app, where the idea is you can place furniture using AR within the space that you've designed. And and I guess it does more than IKEA. IKEA is just obviously to buy products from IKEA, and House is a little broader than that. It allows you to hire designers and architects and builders and things that can offer both the products and the services to kind of make the whole thing happen. Not an app that I'm particularly familiar with, but it's kind of the last step. So they kind of show the process going from measuring your space to designing it in 3 dimensions to picking furniture and that sort of thing. What did you think?
I feel like this ad was meant to appear practical, but it ended up resulting in an aspirational message. I mean, unless you are an interior designer type of person, you do this for a living, I really struggle to imagine a regular person having the idea of, let me scan my room with Measure first. So let me, instead of using like a measuring tape, let me use augmented reality to capture the dimensions of my room. Then let me draw over it, and I just happen to be an artist, so all my drawings are real pretty. Let me draw over it to get an idea of the furniture that might fit, and then let me try another augmented reality app to place some furniture around the room and share the result with a friend or with my partner. I mean, sure, it is technically possible, but it's like those commercials that they show on TV of like the perfect family having breakfast all together in the morning, like everybody's smiling and everybody's happy. Nobody's happy at 6 a.m. in the morning. And
It's not how it works in my house.
if you have a family that everybody wakes up at 6 a.m. and you have breakfast and everybody's smiling and perfectly dressed up and nice looking, I mean, I'm jealous. Good job. But it's not how it works in real life. And this is not how furniture is bought in real life. I struggle to see like the what's the ideal customer here? Who's the person that Apple has in mind? Besides somebody who works in Apple marketing that scans a room with AR and then tries another AR app and then draws with a pencil. I mean, come on. It's an aspirational ad which shows what is technically possible with an iPad, which is fine. And also Morpholio Trace, really good recommendation. But the entire thing feels more like, oh, we should have something about AR because reasons. And sure enough, that's what this ad is.
Yeah, well, the whole series of ads has a little bit of that flavor where you have the keynote ad and you have the AR ad. There's a little bit of, well, we have to make sure we plug certain things from Apple in this as well. And the AR one is probably the one that doesn't hit the right note.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to use AR to measure things, I recommend MeasureKit.
Yeah,
for iOS. It's an excellent third-party version of the measuring APIs built into ARKit. Now, before we wrap up the episode, John, I know that you have a small thing you want to complain about.
this is John's paper cut.
Yes.
I have a problem with the fact that Apple doesn't link anything.
Mhm.
And it's been one of those things that's been nagging at the back of my mind and has bothered me more and more. And these ads are part of it because, yes, a handful of these ads call out the apps by name that they're highlighting. But you know what? This is YouTube.
Yep.
And if you've ever followed a YouTuber, they tend to link the products they use, the apps they use, the things they use in the notes below the video. Why doesn't Apple do that? I mean, I understand that these are ads that are meant to sell the hardware of Apple, but these apps are integral to selling the hardware, and I don't think it takes anything away from Apple to actually link the apps themselves. And I'd like to see that. I'd like to see links to the App Store for all these apps and all these ads. And then, once you start looking for this, you start seeing it everywhere. You and I were trading text messages about an album that we really like from Maggie Rogers recently, and I was looking at the editor's notes of that, and it mentions a great YouTube video that she did. But there's no way to just, click the link or tap the link and see the video. You have to kind of say, oh, now I'm going to open my browser and I'm going to search for this video and see if I can find it. And it's not even that that Apple doesn't want to link things outside the Apple sphere. They don't even link to other things that Apple offers.
Yes. To their own
Right?
stuff. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're in Apple Music and there's an editorial about an album and it talks about all these other albums that a person's done. And there's no links to them within Apple Music that can take you there.
Yeah.
It really bothers me that doesn't exist. And you see it in a lot of places. There's the shot on iPhone, which doesn't link to the people, doesn't link to any of the judges who are doing this new contest. I guess as someone who makes things on the internet, it really bothers me that there's not this kind of linking that is, I think, standard at this point after decades to link to what people are actually doing.
Yeah. There's a aversion to linking. I really never understood this part of Apple. To my knowledge, the only place in the sort of product page type of apps where you can have tappable links is TestFlight. So the description field of TestFlight betas can have clickable or tappable links. But on the iTunes store, on the App Store, in podcast listings. You cannot have links, and Apple itself, they don't link to their own stuff. They force you to Google or to search for this information yourself. And it's especially bad in Apple Music, where they have recently started doing these curated editorials about albums, but they do it at the top of in the description field of an album, and you need to expand this editorial, and none of this is searchable or browsable in any other way. You just need to discover that it exists, and it's not formatted well, because it's not like an article in Apple News. It's just a text field. It's horrible. And I was expecting, YouTube allows you to do cards for clicking on links. It allows you to do descriptions with timestamps or descriptions with links. Just a list, at the very least, just a link to the apps. Like, I don't understand why they don't do this. It's a shame, because it could make it so much easier for people. Because we get these questions from people like, hey, do you know what the app in that part of the video is? Where just Apple should just say what app it is, because they take a commission out of people who buy apps or subscribe to apps. So it's in their own interest. This idea that a link is going to take a customer away from you, it doesn't make any sense, because it's Apple and they own the platform. They own the App Store. They control every single piece. Just put a link in there and let people click on it. I don't understand.
All right, Federico, I think that's a good place to stop for today. I want to thank our sponsor again, Clean My Mac X. And, as always, you can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. You can find Federico. He's over on Twitter at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHN VOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.